My fiancée's quirky food choices are ruining our meals. Now she's disappeared after a fight. AITA for reaching my limit? It was one of those nights when the cracks became impossible to ignore. I had known her quirks for years. Those charming little idiosyncrasies that had once seemed harmless, even endearing. Back in college, when our journey together was just beginning, her eccentric food habits were part of her charm. A small element of the package I thought I understood and loved. But little did I know, this quirky aspect of her personality would slowly start to reveal a troubling pattern that would threaten our relationship to its very core. Last night was supposed to be just a simple night out. We had played our usual weekly league volleyball game, a ritual meant to escape the stress of work and life, to laugh together, bond, and share a meal afterward. We were both starving after the game, our appetites whetted by the salt of the ocean breeze and the physical exhaustion that followed the game. The sports bar we decided to visit was a place where the expectation was simple: no frills food, loud music, and comforting greasy delights. I could almost taste the crispy chicken tenders and golden fries I ordered, a meal that was straightforward, foolproof, and exactly what I needed. She, however, couldn't resist the lure of something different. A chalkboard sign reading, "Snow Crab Special," caught her eye as soon as we walked in. I should have known what would come next. My fiancée's idea of fun was almost always synonymous with unpredictable choices. The problem was that unpredictable often meant impractical, and sometimes inedible. I begged her to pick something else, to just keep things simple for once. But she dismissed my plea, rolled her eyes at what she deemed my boring tastes, and ordered the crab anyway. What happened next was inevitable, and it was also the straw that broke the camel's back. When the food arrived, my plate steaming with crispy tenders and her platter holding an overambitious pile of pale, suspiciously fishy-smelling crab legs, she took one bite and made a face I knew too well. I could already see where this was going. "It tastes awful," she muttered, her lips curving down in disappointment. And then, almost automatically, she reached across the table, already angling her fork at my plate. "Let's switch." "Okay," she said, as if it were an everyday occurrence, because for us, it was. But something snapped in me at that moment. Perhaps it was hunger, the exhaustion from the game, or just the frustration that had been building for years. I refused. For the first time, I said no, a word that felt foreign in my mouth, like a defense mechanism that had been dormant until now. Her eyes widened in shock, the bewilderment replaced quickly by anger. The bar seemed to grow quieter as her voice rose, calling me selfish, unreasonable, unable to read the room, as if the entire problem had always been me. In that moment, I realized this wasn't about crab legs, nor was it about the food she wanted to switch. This was about control, about the dynamics of our relationship that had shifted so subtly over time that I hadn't noticed until I was the one left hungry. She stormed out, her tears blurring her silhouette as she disappeared into the night. I watched her leave, my untouched chicken tenders suddenly losing their appeal. That was the beginning of the unraveling. The moment I realized just how deep our issues ran, a realization that this wasn't quirky anymore. It wasn't fun. It wasn't love. It was something far more unsettling. And as I sat there, alone, I couldn't help but wonder, had I always been this blind to what was happening between us? Or had her quirks always held this kind of power over me? The following days were eerily quiet. She didn't come home that night, nor did she answer my calls. I tried to rationalize her absence, convincing myself she needed some space, that she was cooling off at a friend's place. But as the hours turned into days, a sense of unease settled in. I found myself alternating between anger and worry, anger at her immaturity and refusal to discuss our problems, and worry that maybe I had been too harsh, that perhaps my refusal had pushed her too far. When she finally did reach out, it wasn't a heartfelt apology or even an acknowledgement of what had happened. Instead, it was a text message: "I need time to think. Don't contact me." It was the kind of message that left me reeling, filled with both frustration and confusion. What was there to think about? This wasn't some grand existential crisis. It was about a plate of chicken tenders. Or at least, that's what I had thought. But as I replayed her words over and over, I started to understand that this was about far more than just one meal. It was about years of unspoken expectations, of tiny compromises that had accumulated to the point of breaking us. I began to reflect on our relationship. And the more I did, the more I realized just how much I had let slide. Her quirks had always been there. But what had once seemed like harmless eccentricities had slowly morphed into something more controlling. She had a way of making everything a test, whether it was about food, social gatherings, or even the way we spent our weekends. It was always her way, her choices, her idea of what was fun or interesting. And I had gone along with it, thinking it was easier to keep the peace. But now, I was beginning to see how much I had sacrificed in the process. A week later, she showed up at our apartment. She looked different, tired, perhaps, or maybe it was just that I was seeing her through a different lens. She sat down across from me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, we talked, not about dinner or volleyball or plans for the weekend, but about us. She admitted that she had always thought of herself as the spontaneous one, the one who brought excitement into our relationship, and that my refusal to switch plates had felt like a rejection of who she was. I told her that it wasn't about rejecting her, but about standing up for myself, something I should have done a long time ago. We talked for hours, and by the end of it, there was a sense of clarity. Though not necessarily resolution, we both knew that things couldn't go back to the way they were. Too much had been said. Too much had been revealed. She packed a bag that night and said she was going to stay with her sister for a while. We needed space. We both agreed to figure out what we wanted, if this relationship was worth saving, or if we had reached the end of the road. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of freedom and sadness. I missed her. Of course, I missed the good times, the laughter, the way she could light up a room. But I also felt a sense of relief. A lightness that came from not having to constantly navigate her unpredictable whims. I started doing things I hadn't done in years, cooking meals I liked, going out with friends without worrying about whether she would approve, spending my weekends the way I wanted. It was liberating, but it was also bittersweet. A reminder of what I had lost and what I had gained. Eventually, she reached out again. This time, it was different. There was no anger, no accusations, just a simple request to meet for coffee. When we sat down, it was clear that we had both changed. She spoke about how she had been reflecting on her behavior, how she realized that her need for spontaneity had often come at my expense. She apologized, not just for the crab leg incident, but for the countless times she had made me feel like my needs didn't matter. I apologized too, for not speaking up sooner, for letting my resentment build until it exploded. In the end, we decided to part ways. There was still love between us, but it wasn't enough, not anymore. We had grown too far apart, our differences too deeply ingrained to bridge the gap. It was a painful decision, but it was also the right one. We both needed to find ourselves again, to figure out who we were without each other. As I walked away from that coffee shop, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had loved her, and a part of me always would, but I also knew that I had made the right choice, for both of us. Sometimes love isn't enough to overcome the fundamental differences that pull us apart. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for each other is to let go. And so, I let go. I let go of the past, of the expectations, of the version of us that I had held onto for so long. I let go of the idea that love meant sacrificing who I was for someone else. And as I did, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope for a future that was mine to create. Free from the weight of someone else's expectations. Free to be exactly who I was, no more, no less. AITA for hating my older daughter for throwing a forbidden party that led to my younger daughter was ulted by 4 men? I remember the cold December night as vividly as if it had happened yesterday. The kind of night where the chill in the air bites at your skin. But you feel it much deeper. Like a warning from something terrible brewing. It was on one of these nights that my entire life as a mother and my daughter's lives irrevocably changed. The moment I received the call, I knew that everything that once seemed ordinary would never be the same. Let me take you to the beginning. I am a widow, raising 3 children in a suburban neighborhood that prides itself on being a safe community. My late husband, John, was the glue that held our family together. And after he passed, the responsibility of nurturing and guiding our children fell solely on my shoulders. Despite this immense challenge, I did what every mother does. I put on a brave face and kept going. I worked day shifts and night shifts, whatever I had to do to provide for my children, and hoped that they understood I was trying my best. My eldest daughter, Maya, turned 18 last year, a bright, charismatic teenager who always had a smile ready for everyone she met. She was the kind of person people gravitated toward, and this made me trust her to take care of her younger siblings. It was this trust that ultimately proved to be a mistake, and one that cost us dearly. Leah, my 14-year-old daughter, is gentle, quiet, and often sought refuge in her older sister's outgoing nature. She admired Maya, looked up to her, and relied on her. It was because of this trust and admiration that Leah suffered in ways no young girl should ever experience. It all started with Maya wanting to throw a party. I was reluctant, to say the least. I worked a night shift on the weekends, and I knew the risks of leaving teenagers unsupervised. I told Maya that she could never have a party unless I was home. But I trusted her enough to leave her in charge of Leah when I had to work. This wasn't a new arrangement. In fact, I paid Maya well for taking on the responsibility. Not just because it was necessary, but because I wanted her to understand the weight of caring for someone else. I wanted to instill in her the importance of being a protector, of making sure Leah felt safe. Despite my clear instructions, Maya went ahead with her plans. She decided that a party would be the perfect way to make the winter holidays more exciting. She invited friends, boys included, and these boys were the kind of people Maya knew I would never approve of. They had reputations that made most parents wary, and that should have been enough reason for Maya to keep her distance. But that was the problem. She didn't. That night, Leah was assaulted by 4 boys while Maya was supposed to be taking care of her. This event shattered the very foundation of our lives. Leah, once a bright, ambitious girl who loved cheerleading, now spends her days in a room that feels more like a fortress. She wears her late father's oversized hoodies, seeking comfort and safety in his memory. She no longer wants to be part of the world outside. She quit her cheerleading team. And she barely manages her schoolwork, finishing her classes online from the isolation of her room. What breaks my heart the most is the way she looks at me, a gaze full of questions. A silent plea for answers I do not have. As a mother, nothing is more painful than seeing your child in pain and feeling completely powerless. Maya faced legal consequences for her actions. Though the court was lenient, she paid a fine, did community service, and was put on probation. I took her car away, which was a small gesture compared to the enormity of the pain Leah experienced. Maya, however, didn't seem to grasp the gravity of what had happened. She begged to come back home, pleading for forgiveness, insisting that she wanted to make things right with Leah. But it wasn't that simple. Maya had knowingly invited danger into our home, and the consequences were irreversible. The hardest part of all of this has been trying to find a way forward for our family. Leah has been in therapy, and there were days when it seemed like there was no hope left, days when Leah would break down. Her small frame racked with sobs, and she would tell me she couldn't bear to live anymore. I remember one particular day when she sat in front of me, her eyes empty, and said, "Mom, I want to stop feeling their hands on me. I want to stop now." I had to fight to keep my own tears at bay because I knew she needed me to be strong. I held her hand as they placed her on a psychiatric hold. I kissed her forehead as they took her to a mental health facility, hoping beyond hope that she would find some peace there. One of the most challenging aspects of Leah's recovery has been dealing with Maya's requests to come back home. Maya had not only betrayed my trust, but she also hurt Leah in ways that could never be undone. I listened to Maya's messages, full of apologies and promises to change, and all I could think was how empty they sounded. Leah refused to speak to her sister, and honestly, I couldn't blame her. Even the thought of allowing Maya back into our lives was unbearable. There were moments when I felt guilty for feeling this way. What kind of mother would cut her child off? But the truth is, I had to prioritize Leah's safety, her sense of security, over anything else. Leah has slowly been finding her footing again. She met a boy, someone kind and gentle, who has been helping her rebuild her sense of self-worth. I watch them together, and though I'm happy she has someone, I worry about her relying too much on him. She calls him when she's anxious, and they spend hours on FaceTime. He accompanies us everywhere, and while it's comforting to know he's there for her, I know that her healing cannot depend solely on another person. It's a delicate balance, one I try to navigate as best as I can. As time passed, Leah and I made some changes around the house. I redecorated her room, filling it with warm colors, soft lights, and the kind of cozy furniture that might bring her comfort. It was a small step, but it was one I hoped would help her feel safe again. Leah's journey is far from over, and there are still days when she struggles to find a reason to get out of bed. But there are also good days. Days when I see her smile, even if just for a fleeting moment. Throughout all of this, my relationship with Maya has remained fractured. I tried, I really did, to find it in my heart to forgive her, to understand her, but it's hard when the person you trusted with your most precious possession, your child, is the one who let you down in the worst possible way. Maya's lack of genuine remorse made it even harder. She still believes that what happened was a mistake, a lapse in judgment, rather than a life-altering event for her sister. She doesn't seem to understand the gravity of her actions, and that is something I cannot ignore. In trying to rebuild our lives, I've realized that there are lessons here, hard, painful lessons that I never wanted to learn. Trust is fragile. It is something that must be earned and protected. And once it is broken, it is incredibly difficult to repair. I trusted Maya because I wanted to believe that she understood the importance of family, of protecting her sister. But I was wrong. I also learned that forgiveness is not always possible. And that's okay. Sometimes, the best we can do is protect the ones who need us the most, even if it means distancing ourselves from those we once loved. Leah's story is one of resilience. She is still here, still fighting, and that is more than I could have hoped for on those dark nights when it felt like everything was falling apart. She is slowly finding her way back, piece by piece, and I will be there every step of the way, ready to catch her if she falls. As for Maya, I hope that one day she truly understands the consequences of her actions. I hope she finds a way to be better, to make amends, but that is her journey, not mine. My role now is to be the mother Leah needs, to provide her with a home where she feels safe, loved, and protected. This experience has taught me the importance of boundaries and the need to sometimes make hard choices for the well-being of our loved ones. I have learned that being a mother is not just about loving your children unconditionally, it is also about making choices that protect them, even if it means breaking your own heart in the process. I share this story not for pity but as a reminder to all parents to cherish the safety of their children and understand that trust is not something to be given lightly. It is a fragile, delicate thing, and when shattered, the consequences can be devastating. I hope that in sharing Leah's story, others might find the strength to protect those they love, to make the hard choices, and to understand that it's okay not to forgive if the wound is too deep. Most of all, I hope that Leah's courage can be an inspiration to anyone out there who is struggling, to remind them that it is possible to find your way back, even from the darkest of places.